It happens every time. I'm typing, I'm thinking, I'm wondering where this is going. And every time I think the same thing, I've lost it. Maybe I never had it. Maybe this isn't the thing for me. I feel horrible. I feel worthless. I should have never started doing this. And without fail, I know that I feel this way because I'm working on a first draft, and it's a nightmare. A lot of times, working on a first draft of something, I feel lost. I feel like I've never known where this is supposed to go, what I'm supposed to be doing with it, why I started it in the first place. And maybe I feel like I've always been a hack, that I'm just pretending, that I haven't really earned any kind of mental goodwill in being able to do this correctly. I sit down and I work a draft, and I feel helpless, lost. I just know that this is the first time that I've truly lost it. Maybe I've felt this way before, but this is the time that I sit down and it's over. And then I power through and I finish it, and I just feel horrendous. I feel like this is not a worthwhile pursuit. That maybe it is for some people, but not for me. But I usually at least have the wherewithal to finish and get through that first draft. And then something happens. I get to a second draft, and when I do a second draft, I retype the entire thing from scratch. I print it out and just retype it as if I'm starting from the beginning, using that first draft as kind of a rough outline almost. And something happens during that second draft where it starts to feel a little bit better. And I start to think, maybe this wasn't so bad. Then once I type that second draft, I print that out, and then I kind of start doing line edits on it for a third draft. By the time I get to the third draft and I'm kind of making some finer cuts and slicing out whole sections, I start to feel like maybe I have this. Maybe I do know what I'm doing. And I kind of can't imagine a reason that I would feel like this was so bad. And then every single time I'm working on something, I remember that I felt this exact same way the last time. I went through this whole series of self-hatred and doubt and just horrific feelings of inadequacy and being a fraud. I remember that the last time I felt this exact same way. But then it's time to start the next thing. And I sit down to write a first draft, and I feel like I've never known what I was doing. I feel worthless. I feel like a hack. And I start that whole process over again. And I wish that there was a way to remember that feeling of the third, fourth, fifth, sixth draft and know that I'll get there. But there doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be a way to skip over those first feelings of just horrible ineptitude. But I don't think there is. I think maybe part of it is feeling that way. And maybe that's why you end up feeling a little more confident later on in the process because you felt so bad at the beginning. But the point of all this is that there's no way you get to that third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th draft without that first one. I kind of feel like if you're writing a first draft and you feel like this is really great, that's good, but it also might not drive you to make those cuts, to make those tough decisions. Those decisions are going to be tougher if you're in love with that first draft. I'm always a little suspicious when I feel good writing a first draft. I think it's a little suspect. Like maybe I haven't done some of the work that I needed to do in the outlining process, and maybe there are going to be some problems that present themselves later on that I'm missing because I'm not full of self-hate. I do want to read a quote from Ernest Hemingway. I know that everyone uses part of this little passage, but I think it's important to have the entire context of the thing. I'm sure you've heard a little section of it. Don't get discouraged because there's a lot of mechanical work to writing. There is, and you can't get out of it. I rewrote A Farewell to Arms at least 50 times. You've got to work it over. The first draft of anything is shit. When you start to write, you get all the kick and the reader gets none. But after you learn to work, it's your object to convey everything to the reader so that he remembers it, not as a story he had read, but something that happened to himself. That's the true test of writing. When you can do that, the reader gets the kick and you don't get any. You just get hard work. And the better you write, the harder it is, because every story has to be better than the last one. And I think that's the thing. If you can kind of embrace that feeling of uncertainty and try to have a little more fun in it and recognize it as an opportunity to do whatever you want in that first draft, you're gonna feel bad. You're gonna feel like it's not enough. But it's an act of faith. you'll get to a point that it feels right, but it's not going to be right now. But that's why we're here. One of the things I was thinking about when thinking about this topic is a short story by Shirley Jackson called The Lottery. The story is so tight. There isn't an ounce of fat on it. It's right where it needs to be. And I don't think I'm giving any spoilers away. This collection is the 75th anniversary edition. So you've had 75 years to read the story. But it's about a little village where they're having a lottery. And everyone's very excited about who's going to win the lottery. Everyone wants to know. The whole village kind of gathers. They pull a section of the village, and then everything goes back into the lottery. Then they pull a household, then everything goes back in the lottery. And it's very exciting. Everyone wants to know who's going to win the lottery. And then they pull a family, everything goes back in, and then they finally pull a name. And the winner of the lottery is beat to death with stones. And it subverts expectations. It's really beautiful. It's really beautifully done. It has that tension. It builds tension, and then it releases the tension in a way that is completely surprising. And I think it's important to understand that there are many ways that story could have gone. There are all kinds of directions, all kinds of ways it could have been written. But Jackson wrote it in such a way that it is just focused on this taut endpoint. And I think that's an important thing to think about with first drafts, that if you start with a premise that feels right, that you believe in, if you have sort of a general point that you want to get to, as long as you have that, you'll be able to power through those early drafts, which are so horrific. As long as you know that you have something that's interesting before you even sit down to actually write the thing, that can be enough to get you through. That can be enough of something to believe in.